There was a time when Christy McNichol was everywhere. Her smile, her warmth, and her raw emotion made her a standout presence on screens across America. She wasn't just an actress who performed lines. She was someone who truly lived her roles, who poured herself into every scene with honesty and depth. During the 1970s and 1980s, Christy was not just another face in Hollywood. She was the heartbeat of the industry, adored by audiences for her relatability and charm. People didn't just like her, they felt connected to her. She represented the teenage experience in a way that felt genuine, capturing the struggles, the excitement, and the confusion of growing up. Yet, despite all the fame and adoration, Christy made a choice that shocked everyone. She walked away from Hollywood at the peak of her career. There was no scandal, no big farewell party, just silence. For decades, no one knew the real reason why this talented young actress disappeared from the public eye. Today, we finally understand her story, a story of courage, vulnerability, and survival that goes far beyond the bright lights of Hollywood. Christy McNichol was born on September 11, 1962, in Los Angeles, California, a city where dreams were often bigger than reality. Her family life, however, was far from glamorous. She grew up in a modest home with her mother, Carolyn, and her older brother, Jimmy. Christy's father left the family when she was very young, leaving Carolyn to take on the enormous responsibility of raising her children alone. Carolyn worked tirelessly, juggling jobs as a secretary, a makeup saleswoman, and even taking extra roles in low-budget films to make ends meet. For the McNichols, survival, rather than fame, was the priority. It was during one of these low-budget film projects that fate intervened. Unable to afford a babysitter, Carolyn brought Christy and Jimmy to the set while she worked as a background extra. A crew member noticed the children's bright personalities and suggested they try commercials. What seemed like a passing remark would change everything. Soon, both Christy and Jimmy were auditioning for commercials, landing spots for toothpaste, cereal, and soft drinks. Jimmy, with his natural charm, quickly found success, but Christy stood out for a different reason. She possessed a spark that was hard to define, a mix of innocence, intelligence, and emotional depth that made her unforgettable. Even at 10 years old, Christy's performances weren't just acting, they were lived experiences. Casting directors recognized her rare ability to convey complex emotions, noticing how her expressions could carry both joy and sadness, even in brief moments. By the mid-1970s, Christy was steadily appearing in guest roles on popular television shows like Apple's Way and Starsky and Hutch. However, it was her role as Buddy Lawrence on ABC's acclaimed drama Family in 1976 that truly launched her career. At just 13 years old, she delivered a performance that would earn her critical acclaim and a place in the hearts of millions of viewers. The show tackled real-life issues such as divorce, adolescence, and identity, and Buddy Lawrence quickly became its emotional center. Unlike the perfectly scripted, cookie-cutter kids on other shows, Buddy was complex, sensitive, and sometimes lost. Christy didn't play the role as a character she had to pretend to be. She played it as a part of herself, drawing on her own experiences and emotions. Critics praised her maturity and authenticity, and she earned 3 consecutive Emmy nominations, winning twice in 1977 and 1979. For someone barely a teenager, these achievements were extraordinary. Fans adored her. Magazines featured her on covers, and talk shows clamored to host her. Christy McNichol was America's little sister, a young actress whose talent seemed beyond her years. But fame, as glamorous as it appeared on the surface, came with a cost that Christy was only beginning to understand. Behind the scenes, Christy's life was far from easy. Her mother, who managed her career, depended on Christy's earnings to support the family, placing enormous responsibility on her young shoulders. Christy once said she felt like the grown-up in the household while her mother acted like a child. This emotional role reversal took a toll, forcing Christy to grow up faster than most teens. While other girls worried about school dances and socializing, Christy's concerns revolved around contracts, scripts, and professionalism. Her days were filled with long hours of filming, public appearances, and the constant pressure to perform. By the time Family ended in 1980, Christie had achieved more than many actors could dream of in a lifetime. She was respected, adored, and undeniably talented. Yet underneath all the success, she was exhausted, carrying the weight of responsibilities that no teenager should bear. Hollywood had demanded everything she could give, and while the public saw a shining star, the real Christie was beginning to crack under the pressure. Fame, it seemed, came at the expense of personal peace. At 18, when Family ended, Christie's life did not slow down. Offers flooded in, and she accepted almost all of them. In 1980, she starred alongside Tatum O'Neal in Little Darlings, a coming-of-age story about two girls from different worlds making a daring bet at summer camp. The film explored adolescence with honesty and nuance, and Christie's performance as Angel Brightheit, a street-smart girl hiding vulnerability beneath her confident exterior, was mesmerizing. Critics praised her naturalism, noting how effortlessly she embodied the complexities of teenage life. The movie turned her into a cultural phenomenon, solidifying her status as America's favorite young actress. Teen magazines clamored for interviews, fans adored her rebellious yet relatable persona, and Christie became the symbol of teenage authenticity. Yet, the rapid pace of her career and the constant demands of Hollywood began to take a toll on her emotional and physical well-being. She found herself struggling with the pressure to succeed while also trying to navigate the challenges of growing up in the public eye. Christie continued to take on demanding roles, appearing in The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia alongside Dennis Quaid and Mark Hamill, earning one of the highest salaries ever paid to a teenage actress at the time. In 1981, she played the daughter of a recovering alcoholic in Neil Simon's Only When I Laugh, earning a Golden Globe nomination. On the surface, her career seemed unstoppable. Yet inside, Christie was unraveling. She later admitted that she struggled to say no to anyone, directors, producers, even her mother. The constant expectation to perform and comply with Hollywood's demands chipped away at her mental health. She experienced panic attacks, insomnia, and intense anxiety, living as a child trapped in an adult's world. By 1982, the cracks in her emotional health became apparent. A poorly received film, The Pirate Movie, highlighted the contrast between her previous acclaim and Hollywood's fickle nature. While the movie flopped and critics were harsh, the real struggle lay beneath the surface. Christie was facing a battle with her own mind and well-being, one that no amount of fame could protect her from. By 1984, Christie took on a role in Just the Way You Are, a romantic drama set in the French Alps about a musician learning to accept herself despite her disability. Ironically, the film mirrored Christie's personal struggles with mental health. By this point, her emotional and physical exhaustion had reached critical levels. She suffered extreme weight loss, nightmares, and severe anxiety. Friends and colleagues noticed she was disappearing, not only physically but emotionally. Doctors diagnosed her with exhaustion, anxiety, and trauma resulting from years of constant performance and emotional labor. The studio tried to frame it as a chemical imbalance, but tabloids were cruel, branding her as unstable. In reality, Christie was fighting to save herself. She eventually returned to finish the film, but the spark that had captivated audiences had dimmed. This period marked the beginning of her gradual retreat from Hollywood, as she began prioritizing her health over fame. Her journey highlighted the hidden costs of child stardom and the immense pressures faced by young actors in the industry. After these tumultuous years, Christie tried to rebuild her career with films like Dream Lover, You Can't Hurry Love, and The Forgotten One, but Hollywood had moved on. She struggled to regain the enthusiasm she once had for acting. The fame that had once been her dream now felt like a prison, constraining her rather than liberating her. Behind closed doors, she battled bipolar disorder, insomnia, mood swings, and overwhelming sadness. Her brother, Jimmy McNichol, remained a steadfast support, helping her navigate the dark periods of her life. He moved in with her, cooked meals, and offered emotional support when she needed it most. Christie, who had spent so many years taking care of others, finally experienced the care and attention she had been missing since childhood. It was a turning point in her life, providing a foundation for the healing that would follow. Christy McNichol's brief return to television came in 1988 when NBC offered her a role on Empty Nest, a spin-off of the hugely popular The Golden Girls. After years of demanding and emotionally draining work in film, this opportunity was different. It offered her something she hadn't had in years: stability, a regular schedule, and a supportive environment. She played Barbara Weston, a sensitive yet strong-willed police officer living with her widowed father. The show was lighter than the intense drama of family, and for Christy, this change was a welcome reprieve. She was finally surrounded by laughter, camaraderie, and a work environment that allowed her to feel safe and valued. Viewers quickly embraced her return, excited to see the young actress they had admired for so long back on television. Ratings were strong, and Empty Nest became a hit, running alongside The Golden Girls in primetime slots. For fans, Christy McNichol's return felt like a homecoming, a chance to see her vibrant presence on screen once more. Yet while she smiled for the cameras and delivered her lines with professionalism, the emotional challenges she had faced in the years prior had not disappeared. Christy still carried the weight of her early life in Hollywood, the pressures that came with fame, and the mental health struggles she had quietly endured. Every day on set, she worked to mask the anxiety, panic, and sadness that lingered just beneath the surface. It was an ongoing balancing act, performing as if everything were normal while internally managing the scars of a decade-long career that had demanded more than any teenager or adult should have to give. Despite the success of Empty Nest, Christy realized that continuing in the entertainment industry would not allow her to fully heal. By 1992, during the show's 5th season, she made a decision that shocked both fans and colleagues. She walked away from Hollywood without fanfare, publicity, or explanation. Her publicist cited health reasons, a vague statement that left the public curious but uninformed. In truth, Christy's departure was a deeply personal choice. She had been grappling with bipolar disorder, then referred to as manic depression, and she knew that continuing to work in an environment with relentless schedules and public scrutiny would only worsen her condition. For Christy, stepping away was an act of survival, not a retreat from responsibility or talent. Her honesty about her mental health came much later, in 2001, when she publicly revealed that she had spent years suffering from the disorder, a revelation that helped break barriers around the stigma of mental illness. In the 1990s, such discussions were rare, and Christy's courage in sharing her story inspired many who were struggling in silence. She wanted people to know that it was okay to step away, to prioritize personal well-being over external expectations. While Hollywood often glorifies fame and success, Christy's story reminded the world that even the brightest stars need space to heal. Walking away was, paradoxically, her way of reclaiming power over her life and her choices. It was a quiet but profound statement about self-preservation, mental health, and the importance of personal boundaries, even for someone who had been admired and adored by millions. Following her departure from Hollywood, Christy dedicated herself to a life that prioritized her own happiness and healing. She had spent decades giving to others, her fans, her family, and the entertainment industry, and now she finally had the opportunity to live for herself. At 39, for the first time since childhood, there were no scripts, no filming schedules, and no pressure to perform for public approval. The silence, once unfamiliar and perhaps intimidating, became a form of therapy. Christy began teaching acting at a private school in Los Angeles, sharing her decades of experience and wisdom with a new generation of students. Teaching allowed her to remain connected to the craft she loved without the stress and demands of professional acting. She emphasized empathy, authenticity, and truth in performance, encouraging her students to explore the emotional depths of their characters. Outside of teaching, Christy embraced a quiet personal life, finding joy in simple routines and meaningful relationships. She spent time with close friends, volunteered for local charities, and nurtured her love for animals, particularly her miniature dachshunds, who she credited with keeping her grounded. Through these years, Christy also faced personal losses, including the death of her close friend and former partner, actress Elizabeth Brooks, to cancer just days before her 35th birthday. The loss was devastating, yet it also deepened her empathy and reinforced her commitment to helping others. She became actively involved in supporting mental health organizations and cancer research, turning her experiences of pain and struggle into a force for good. Her life, once defined by public recognition and fame, was now guided by quiet acts of care, resilience, and self-discovery. During this period, Christy McNichol also embraced her identity in a way that had previously been impossible in the glare of Hollywood. In 2012, she made a public statement through her publicist, revealing that she was gay and had been living with her partner, Marty Allen, since the early 1990s. This was not a publicity move or an attempt to reignite media attention. It was a conscious act of honesty after decades of silence. For Christy, sharing her truth was an extension of the life she had been building, one based on authenticity, love, and self-respect. Marty had been a steady presence through the most challenging periods of her life: the breakdown, the departure from Hollywood, and the long journey of rebuilding her personal life. Together, they created a home marked by stability, laughter, and mutual support, a stark contrast to the chaos of her earlier years in show business. Christie's revelation also provided a role model for fans struggling with their own identities, demonstrating that it is possible to live authentically even after enduring years of societal pressure and personal struggle. Her openness about her sexuality, combined with her willingness to discuss mental health, positioned her as a quiet but influential figure in advocating for empathy and understanding in both entertainment and society at large. Today, Christy McNichol continues to live a life far removed from the frenzy of her early career. She is 62 years old, residing in Los Angeles, teaching, mentoring, and occasionally attending fan events. Her estimated net worth of $7 to $8 million comes primarily from royalties from her classic shows and films, yet wealth has never been her measure of fulfillment. For Christy, what defines her is survival, resilience, and the courage to live life on her own terms. She once reflected, "I was on the big stage between ages 8 and 30. I left show business to play my biggest part, myself." These words encapsulate the essence of her journey. Christy didn't walk away from Hollywood because she failed or because she lacked talent. She walked away because she recognized the importance of her own well-being and the need to reclaim control over her life. Her story reminds us that fame, while alluring, can be both a blessing and a burden, and that the greatest courage sometimes lies not in seeking the spotlight, but in stepping away from it to find peace, love, and authenticity. Christy McNichol's journey from beloved child star to private, self-determined adult serves as a powerful reminder that behind every smiling face on screen, there is a real person navigating their own struggles. Her story is one of bravery, honesty, and survival, a narrative that goes beyond the superficial glamour of Hollywood. She endured pressures that few could imagine, faced mental health challenges that were largely misunderstood at the time, and emerged with a life rooted in love, teaching, and personal fulfillment. Her departure from Hollywood was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one in which she could prioritize herself and live authentically. Through her openness about mental health and her sexuality, she broke taboos and offered hope to those who may have felt isolated or misunderstood. In a world where the pursuit of fame often overshadows well-being, Christie's decision to step away represents the ultimate act of courage and self-respect. Her life reminds us that success should not be measured by public recognition alone, but by the ability to survive, heal, and create a life of purpose, honesty, and love. After stepping away from Hollywood, Christy McNichol dedicated herself to a life that was profoundly different from the one she had known as a child star. Freed from scripts, call sheets, and public scrutiny, she found an opportunity to focus on personal growth and meaningful contributions in ways that were impossible during her time in the entertainment industry. One of the most significant avenues she pursued was teaching acting at a private school in Los Angeles. For decades, Christy had performed in front of cameras, learning the intricacies of craft, timing, and emotional expression. Now, she channeled that knowledge into guiding young actors, many of whom looked up to her not just for her talent, but for the honesty she brought to her work. In her classes, Christie emphasized empathy, emotional truth, and authenticity, encouraging students to explore their characters from a place of deep understanding rather than simply memorizing lines. Her experiences as a child star who had faced immense pressure and expectation gave her unique insight into the challenges young performers often encounter. Beyond teaching technique, she became a mentor, offering guidance on navigating the demands of the industry, understanding personal boundaries, and maintaining mental and emotional well-being. For many of her students, working with Christie was transformative. They learned not only how to act, but also how to approach their careers with self-respect and integrity. Teaching allowed Christie to remain connected to her passion without the stress and relentless scrutiny of professional acting, creating a safe space where creativity could flourish. Alongside teaching, Christie's personal life flourished in quieter, yet equally profound ways. She embraced routines and hobbies that grounded her in the present, allowing her to experience joy outside the demands of fame. Yoga became a practice that helped stabilize both her mind and body, offering moments of calm in what had once been a chaotic life. She filled her home with animals, particularly her miniature dachshunds, who she described as keeping her grounded and reminding her that life could be joyful without external recognition. Christie also became actively involved in charitable work, supporting causes related to mental health and cancer research. The loss of close friends, including her former partner Elizabeth Brooks, had left indelible marks on her heart, but it also deepened her empathy and commitment to helping others. Through volunteer work and advocacy, Christie transformed her personal struggles into acts of service, turning her experiences of pain into sources of support for others. She learned to create a life that was rich in meaning, connection, and stability, a life in which personal fulfillment mattered more than public acclaim. These years of quiet reflection and meaningful engagement allowed her to reclaim control over her identity, separate from the expectations of Hollywood and the pressures of being constantly in the public eye. Christie's relationship with her partner, Marty Allen, was a cornerstone of this new chapter. Marty had been a steady presence during some of the most challenging periods of her life, providing unwavering support as she navigated mental health struggles, career transitions, and personal growth. The couple's relationship, which began in the early 1990s, was private and built on mutual understanding, trust, and